Hello, brothers and sisters. Scott and Kylie again here from Down Under. It's good to be with you today. Today we're going to be talking about the causes of evil spirit possession. The first thing we're going to cover, there has to be something that keeps evil spirits out of us. It's not just the laws, but it seems like there must be some sort of a barrier that does not permit evil spirits to enter us. And so we have a couple of quotes. These are not from church sources, but they are very credible sources. The first one is from the book Return from Tomorrow by Dr. George Ritchie. And in it he describes, he died for approximately 9 minutes, and he was taken around the spirit world and around the world by someone that he believed was Jesus Christ. And he said he was taken to a bar where men were drinking. He said, gradually I began to notice something else. All of the living people we were watching were surrounded by a faint luminous glow, almost like an electrical field over the surface of their bodies. This luminosity moved on as they moved, like a second skin made out of a pale, scarcely visible light. At first I thought it must be reflected brightness from the person at my side, but the buildings we entered gave off no reflection, neither did inanimate objects, and then I realized that the non-physical beings didn't either. My own unsolid body, I now saw, was without this glowing sheath. At this point, the light drew me inside a dingy bar and grill near what looked like a large naval base. A crowd of people, many of them sailors, lined the bar 3 deep, while others jammed wooden booths along the wall. Though a few were drinking beer, most of them seemed to be belting whiskeys as fast as the 2 perspiring bartenders could pour them. Then I noticed a striking thing. A number of the men standing at the bar seemed unable to lift their drinks to their lips. Over and over I watched them clutch at their shot glasses, hands passing through the solid tumblers, through the heavy wooden countertop, through the very arms and bodies of the drinkers around them. And these men, every one of them, lacked the aureole of light that surrounded the others. Then the cocoon of light must be a property of physical bodies only. The dead, we who had lost our solidness, had lost this second skin as well, and it was obvious that these living people, the light-surrounded ones, the ones actually drinking, talking, jostling each other, could neither see the desperately thirsty disembodied beings among them, nor feel their frantic pushing to get their glasses. I thought I had seen heavy drinking at fraternity parties, but the way civilians and servicemen at this bar were going at it beat everything. I watched one young sailor rise unsteadily from a stool, take 2 or 3 steps, and sag heavily to the floor. But 2 of his buddies stooped down and started dragging him away from the crush, but that was not what I was looking at. I was staring in amazement at the bright cocoon around the unconscious sailor. Simply opened up. It parted the very crown of his head and began peeling away from his head, his shoulders. Instantly, quicker than I had ever seen anyone move, one of the insubstantial beings who had been standing near him at the bar was on top of him. He had been hovering like a thirsty shadow at the sailor's side, greedily following every swallow the young man made. Now he seemed to spring at him like a beast of prey. In the next instant, to my utter mystification, the springing figure had vanished. It had all happened even before the 2 men had dragged their unconscious load from under the feet of those at the bar. 1 minute I distinctly seen 2 individuals. By the time they propped the sailor against the wall, there was only 1. And twice more, as I stared stupefied, the identical scene was repeated. Was this cover of light some kind of shield then? Was it a protection against disembodied beings like myself? Presumably these substanceless creatures had once had solid bodies, as I myself had had. Suppose that when they had been in these bodies, they had developed a dependence on alcohol that went beyond the physical, that became mental, spiritual even. Then when they lost that body, except what they could briefly take possession of one another, they would be cut off for all eternity from the thing that they could never stop craving. Now this next one is from the book Visions of Glory. And in it, Spencer describes what he saw when a spirit guide took him around the world. And he was watching a young man who was in the church. He said, I had understood that he had been awakened from his sleep by one of these tempters who had been influencing his dreams, urging him to awaken and need a sexual high. As soon as he made the choice to get out of bed and actually partake, the disembodied spirits had joined in. They were drawn to him like a moth to a searchlight in a dark sky. They came at once. By accepting the temptation and deciding to do it, he had given them permission to enter him and experience his sexual thrill with him. I saw many disembodied spirits competing to enter the small room with him. The evil spirits remained at just 4. When he made the decision to partake, all of his good intentions and desires were immediately drowned out by the passions and the control of the evil spirits. The good spirits that had been near him as he slept were forced a distance away until they could not hear him. He could not hear them. Eventually they left, driven away by his choices. Now this young man was looking at pornography. He said when he reached a pinnacle of lust in his body, a black tear or rip appeared at the crown of his head. In that instance, the disembodied spirits began to attack. They looked like football players tackling the guy with a ball. They were hoping to share just a moment of his physical feelings and excitement. They acted like hungry dogs going after the same carcass. That's some pretty serious descriptions. And now this is not doctrine, what we're going to talk about next, but based on personal experience and the fact that we can verify at least Dr. Ritchie's accounts through all the quotes of the apostles and prophets and scriptures. We believe that there are certain things about this protective barrier that Dr. Ritchie described. Elder Bruce R. McConkie taught that there are 3 ways a person can become possessed by evil spirits: sin, depression, and physical weakness, and that's from The Mortal Messiah, Volume 2, page 282. The question then is, how do these things permit an evil spirit to force entry into the body? It seems that there's a synergistic effect between the body and the spirit that creates a protective barrier which keeps evil spirits from possessing a body. Now, synergy or synergism is the interaction or cooperation of 2 or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. So what we're surmising is that apparently the mating of the spirit with the body, the interaction of the 2, creates this protective barrier. And we're not really sure how this works. We've speculated on it, and we've talked about it quite a bit. The best thing we can really describe is that the effect can be compared to the workings of a computer. There are 2 components that make up a computer. You've got your software and your hardware. And the combination of the 2 creates an effective working machine. And our spirit is the software. That is the fluid, intangible component that we can't see, but has the effect of animating our bodies. So our body, more specifically our brain, is the hardware. The exterior of the computer is our body. It can be battered and worn like mine is, but as long as the hardware inside is intact and undamaged, the computer is going to continue to work. And in my case, it's kind of questionable how well it's working. Remember that everything was created spiritually before it was created temporally. So think about this. The creation of our physical bodies was patterned after the creation of our spirit bodies. The spirit identity, the real us, is composed of the spirit body and the intelligence housed by the spirit body. And that comes from The Progress of Man, page 11. Now, the brain housed within the temporal body is the equivalent, it's the hardware of the intelligence housed within the spirit. This makes the intelligence or the spirit identity the software component of the hardware brain. Now, when something is introduced to the computer software, such as a virus or an improperly written program, or the workings of some individual hardware components are interrupted by a power surge or they become worn and damaged, kind of like mine, the computer begins to function haphazardly or erratically, kind of like mine. If the damage to the hardware is severe enough, you get the blue screen of death. Unfortunately, I have not experienced that. And the computer completely stops working. So the protective barrier seems to be the result of the mating with and the interaction of the spirit identity and the brain. Now, both the spirit and the brain need the right environment to function properly. The spirit needs constant spiritual nourishment, and the brain needs the proper amount of nutrition, which eventually makes the neurotransmitters that ensure proper brain function. If either the spirit identity or the proper brain balance is disturbed through improper nourishment, the protective barrier can fail. So the next question we've got to ask then is, what disturbs the spirit and the brain? Sin and transgression are the viruses that disrupt the software, our spirit identity. The definition of sin and transgression simply boils down to anything that offends the Holy Ghost, which causes him to withdraw. Elder Oakes goes a little bit further into that, talking about the differences between sins and transgressions. Essentially, sins are what's called in the legal terms malum in se, meaning that it is wrong because it's inherently wrong. So that would be lying, stealing, hurting people, sexual sin. And then transgressions are malum prohibitum, meaning that it is something that is prohibited by law. That's why Adam didn't commit a sin. He committed a transgression because what he was doing was prohibited by God, not necessarily was it inherently wrong. So Joseph Smith said, "The devil has no power over us, only as we permit him. The moment we revolt at anything which comes from God, the devil takes power." In other words, it only takes one single deviation for Satan to take power. When we sin, we go against the light of Christ that lets us know good from evil. When we sin, we offend the Holy Ghost, and he withdraws, and in turn, that leaves the opening for Satan to exert power over us. And sin disrupts the spirit identity component of the synergistic protective barrier, and that puts us in jeopardy. So consequently, we're then open to possession by evil spirits. The hardware side of the synergy, our brain, is affected by actual physical damage, which I've had, but more likely to happen is improper nutrition. We may mention a little bit of that. We're going to get into that in the next podcast in great detail. And another thing that can happen are drugs that alter our brain chemistry, which we will talk about today. And then we're going to talk about it again on the next podcast. Proper nutrition from wholesome, nutritious food is essential for our body's chemistry. The body's workshop, really, to produce the neurotransmitters is essential to the proper function of the hardware, our brain. And the proper ratio of omega fatty acids, 3 to 6, comes from the foods we eat. The other area that affects our brain chemistry, drugs, narcotics, alcohol, barbiturates, harsh stimulants, hallucinogens, psychotropics, or any other mind-altering chemical. And all of these things can disrupt the protective barrier, causing it to fail. From there,
we're going to now talk a little bit about Satan's purposes. He's got three main purposes, like the church has three main purposes or mission statement. Satan's first mission statement is to destroy the agency of man, where the church is to proclaim the gospel. But you can see, if he tries to destroy the agency through all these different tools and resources that he has, you're probably not going to listen to missionaries when they try and proclaim the gospel to you. His second purpose, Satan's second purpose, is to possess the bodies of Adam and his posterity. And so the second mission statement for the church is to perfect the saints. But if you're possessed, that's going to be a really hard challenge to have someone that's being possessed to try and get them to the point of being better, becoming a better person. And then Satan's third mission statement is to make captive the souls of men, where we're to redeem the dead. So, but if they're in captivity, how do we redeem them? We try and release them from spirit prison. So you can see that he has a counter plan to everything that Heavenly Father has. So he has his own laws and counter plan. And so because it's we've got so much information on sin and transgression, that's all we'll probably be able to cover out of the three possible ways that you can become possessed. And the next
okay, so there's a few quotes here from Elder Bruce R. McConkie that we want to mention when it comes to possession. He said, this is in the Doctrinal New Testament Commentary, he said, manifestly as in all things, there are laws and conditions under which devils have power to force entry into human bodies. He also said that however it may run counter to the carnal mind to read of men possessed and of other men who can cast them out, such as one of the realities of mortal life. And then he went on to say that it should be understood that these two influences in the world, good and evil, are manifest through the ministrations of actual spirit personages, both good and evil, from the unseen world. The power and influence wielded by Satan is exercised through the host of evil spirits who do his bidding, and who have power according to laws that exist to impress their wills upon the minds of receptive mortals. Okay.
The next area that we're going to discuss is the area of priestcraft and how priestcraft can get you possessed. In 2 Nephi 26:29, it states, men preaching and setting themselves up for a light to the world, that they may get gain and praise of the world, they do not seek the welfare of Zion. So we can see that those that set themselves up in regards to priestcraft, so they're using their spiritual gifts to set themselves up. So they may have had gifts of revelation. We're not doubting that they may have gifts, but if they use those gifts contrary to the order of God to set themselves up as a light to the world, to get praise of the world, and they take money for these gifts, that they are actually they're sinning against the order of God. And we can see that people have done that. They're leading a lot of the church members astray with using priestcraft. And I'm not saying again that they didn't have revelation to begin with, but they've used it in a way contrary to the order of God, and now they are actually setting themselves up as a light to the world to get gain and not for the welfare of Zion, which leads us into
leading others into sin. Alma 36 verse 14. Alma was talking to his son Helaman, and he was telling him about the repentance process that he had to go through and what caused him to have to go through that repentance process. And Alma said briefly, this is in Alma 36:14, that he led them away unto destruction. Now, leading others into sin could be nothing more than simply providing materials or goods that are contrary to the gospel standards. For example, violating the word of wisdom by providing tea, coffee, tobacco, alcohol, selling it. In his book, in can't remember exactly when this was, President Kimball wrote that buying and selling things that have been proscribed by God, meaning they're wrong, that Heavenly Father's prohibited them, is getting filthy lucre. Other things would be people who would say, I'm not going to look at pornography, but, I'll go ahead and sell it. That's basically providing opportunities for other people to sin. Then another thing that can cause a person to be possessed is doing something that's contrary to the order of the church. And this comes from the autobiography of Benjamin Brown. And he was a fairly, I believe that he was also a mission president. I don't remember completely. But he talks about a woman that he gave a blessing to that was possessed. And he'd cast it out. And he said after a week afterwards, the same spirit re-entered the sister, and this time fully confessed his character. In answer to our inquiries, he said his name was Legion. This explained how it must be that the woman, after we had cast out an evil spirit, was under an evil influence, for there must have been many spirits. He also reviled our priesthood, but he had to submit to it at last, saying to us, "Oh, you have the priesthood, have you? Well, then cast me out. Command me to come out," trying to shake our faith, and thus incapacitate us to rebuke him successfully. Failing in this, he tried another method by entering me. I felt seized by a strange influence, and to every question put to the woman, I knew the answer she was going to give, for I was possessed by a similar spirit. This broke the chain of our union and strength. Consequently, I requested the elders to rebuke the evil spirit from me, after which, at our rebuke, he left the woman. Previous to this, the sister had been a very faithful saint, and she ever afterwards was, but she had given the devil ground by encouraging a spirit contrary to the order of the church, taking upon herself to rebuke the elders, and he, the evil spirit, claimed his right by virtue of her transgression.
This is a really important area because a lot of people don't understand just how crafty and cunning and deceptive evil spirits are, and manipulative. They're able to make people think that they are receiving revelation when, false spirits and spirits contrary to the order of God, when they're not, because as we know that they will tell 99 truths to get one lie in, and you may never even know about the lie until they're ready to disclose you as a false preacher, so that they will make people think and make you think that you are following a spirit of revelation from God, the Holy Ghost, whoever it may be, spirit guides, spirit helpers, whatever you want to call them. And it will be so real, and people will think it is real, because you will be proclaiming Christ-like things and talking about church-related topics, like you are a very good person, but you've been taken by a false spirit. And that's very dangerous, because sometimes they can lead you on for years and years and years, and then what they want to do is drop you and disclose you to the world as being a fraud and a phony, and that's what will happen eventually.
Okay, another thing that is a possibility of possession is looking beyond the mark. And this comes again from Bruce R. McConkie, The Mortal Messiah, From Bethany to Calvary, Volume 2, page 37. Perhaps somehow many of the Jews of that day, zealous, religiously inclined, yet going beyond the mark, where spiritual things are concerned, got themselves into a state where evil spirits could enter their bodies. Now, in Jacob 4:14, he talks a bit about this. But behold, the Jews were a stiff-necked people, and they despised the words of plainness and killed the prophets, and sought for things they could not understand. Wherefore, because of their blindness, which blindness came by looking beyond the mark, they must needs fall. For God hath taken away his plainness from them, and delivered unto them many things which they cannot understand, because they desired it. And because they desired it, God hath done it, that they may stumble. Now this is from Elder Dean L. Larson from Ensign, November 1987. Jacob speaks of people who placed themselves in serious jeopardy in spiritual things because they were unwilling to accept simple, basic principles of truth. They entertained and intrigued themselves with things they could not understand. They were apparently afflicted with a pseudo-sophistication and a snobbishness that gave them a false sense of superiority over those who came among them with the Lord's words of plainness. They went beyond the mark of wisdom and prudence, and obviously failed to stay within the circle of fundamental gospel truths which provide a basis for faith.
And this is what you can see happening today with all the scientific discoveries, or all the different healing, people coming out with different ways of healing and so forth, which is really anything that's contrary to the order of God is not of God. But they were very secular, and they added their own laws in, and they wanted to be right, of course. They wanted to be right, and so, which is in opposition to humility. And so they look beyond the mark, and we can see that happening today, that people are rejecting gospel truths.
And which falls under unbelief. Which
falls under the next topic is unbelief. But they're rejecting the gospel truths for a more scientific-based, secular approach. And they're actually doing detrimental harm to their own spirituality.
Yeah. There's so many ways that unbelief can get you. Doctrine and Covenants specifically states that unbelief is a sin, and which is essentially rejecting the gospel truths. There is a less serious form of unbelief, which is doubt, but that again can cause trouble for you. And you have to get rid of that doubt. Listening to the lies of others, that will do it to you.
Or the false traditions and inherited lies.
Yeah. Wilford Woodruff talks about an incident that happened when he was on his mission, and this is from his journal. He said, I had ample evidence of the fact that lying spirits had gone out into the world for 3 persons whom I had baptized, and had been visited by Mr. Douglas, who told them that I denied the Bible and could not be depended upon. And they yielded to his insinuations until the devil took possession of them. They were in a disaffected condition and sent for me. When I met them, they were in great affliction, but when I instructed them in the principles of the gospel and administered to them, they were delivered from the evil influence and rejoiced. And we're not going to cover nearly everything that could possibly get you possessed. Sin essentially covers a wide range of things. Word of wisdom violations. What about that?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have developed schizophrenia, and we'll get into mental illness later, through word of wisdom violations and continuing on in those violations. And when you talk to them and interact with them, you know that there is a bad spirit. You know there's a foul spirit that has taken them. And that's a hard one, because a lot of the people with schizophrenia and different mental illnesses do have a physical weakness as well. They have a cognitive impairment. So that is a really hard area but I know growing up, when my mum would drink every weekend, I could see a difference in her countenance. I saw, looking back now, knowing what I know, even then I was very fearful and scared and insecure. But looking back now, I've seen throughout my life a lot of people that have changed. Their behaviours have changed so dramatically that you know that, and their countenance and their eyes have changed, and you know that they've become possessed. They've let in a unclean spirit. Sometimes, as I said, a foul spirit, which
cause you nothing but trouble.
Yeah, so we will cover mental illness in
the next podcast.
I don't know how many podcasts it will take, because it's a very intricate area. Very complicated. But the next subject we'll talk about is spiritualism.
It's essentially getting into the occult.
Mm-hmm. So experimenting with anything like astrology, sorcery, witchcraft, seances,
voodoo,
fortune telling, psychics can all open you up for possession, even if you are just visiting these people and you're not actually involved in that. You are putting yourself in jeopardy of becoming possessed.
Yeah, something like an Ouija board.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you have looked at the videos on the internet. Some of it's made up, but there are things that you can see that is just not made up. And a Ouija board is just so terribly, terribly dangerous.
When I was a child, and my family weren't into the occult practices at all, but this is just how Ouija boards can actually, filter through a society of interests. I remember my family, like my mum, my auntie, and even my nan and a few other relatives had one, and I was only 7, and I was sitting on the sidelines, basically, sitting back on a chair, several feet away, and they were asking questions. They put their hand on the glass and they're asking all these questions, and they were being answered, and I was in shock. And because a lot of the time it would still be moving when there was no hands on it, answering questions. And I was really getting scared of this. So something was telling me inside, this is really scary. And it got to the point where they were, I must have been asking too many questions, because it just spun around the table, the glass by itself, and then flung off the table. And I was like in shock, because I remember I was sitting with my cousin who was not much older than me. And then they put it back on and started asking questions again, and it was doing the same thing. And about relatives and things like that, they were asking that they did the same thing, and it spun around the table again really fast. And then it flung off again onto the carpet again, which is thick carpet with the underlay. But this time it smashed into little tiny pieces. And I never forgot that. I was just petrified. And we probably were cursed after that, the whole family. But these are really conjuring type of things that just really shouldn't be even gone to, or So I gained a witness of evil spirits. All right.
Elder James E. Faust talked about in one of his talks that you should avoid all forms of demonism, and he named off a number of different things, and basically it all deals with the occult. Another one of the things that will open you up to possession is apathy, the sin of apathy and indifference. It's fairly well self-explanatory. Just simply totally indifferent. Remember that you're either going forward or you're going backwards. There is no in between. The Lord is black or white. Mm-hmm. And so remember what he said in Revelations. It is, you were lukewarm, he will spew you out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. He would rather you hot or cold. And then deception. Oh my goodness.
And that can bring you back up to like even with psychics, like some people are receiving their revelation from evil spirits, and it's right, but they don't realize that it's more of a psychic revelation, and so they actually think it's coming from the Holy Ghost. So this is the deception that Satan is able to, and these evil spirits are so deceptive that they can make people think things that are completely false.
Yeah.
And so,
if you're a deceitful person, lying, half-truths, what is called as a little white lie, there's no such thing as a white lie. It's either a deceit or the truth. Those things will open you up. Probably one of the biggest things that we're dealing with in the world today is lust. Mm-hmm. The scriptures talk about an overflowing scourge. And I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure that overflowing scourge is pornography.
Yeah, a friend of ours was talking about that too, and it's definitely spreading across the world. It's a rampant. It's a pandemic. It's just absolutely unbelievable that it's spread across the world, and it's luring the young people. And before it was, more so young men and stuff like that. But the women are completely, if they're not involved in it, they're dressing so inappropriately that they sort of are involved in it. And as I say, we go up to the shopping centre, and the boys and the men, 90% of the boys and the men are dressed appropriately, very appropriately, but 90% of them are. But 90% of the women are dressed inappropriately. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, what's happening to these young girls? They're being lured in that the only thing that's important is their body.
And lust doesn't just go to just sexual.
Yeah.
You could lust after money and greed. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned before, President Kimball talked about filthy lucre. And that's essentially buying and selling things that Heavenly Father prohibits. Gambling, lotteries, bingo games, anything that you're basically not earning. People are lustful for power.
Yeah, and we can see that happening throughout the world. We have powerful people running the world. And what I see is it all sort of meshes together. The evil spirit component with the occult component, with the power component and the money component, and big industry component, because the ones that run everything are basically using all these different aspects for their greed, for their power, for their occult practices,
material things, social status.
So you can see how it all just weaves together. And they're in cahoots, of course, with evil spirits. So the higher echelons of society are the ones that are really in communication with evil spirits. So they're the occult type, the foul spirits, and so they know a lot about sciences and things that are happening because they're all working together. We've got mad scientists working with mad, crazy, evil spirits that are high up there and ones that have died, and they're all together brainstorming on how to make AIs and how to make certain cities so we're under surveillance and we're confined and everything. They're just taking over everything.
Other things that are a surefire way to get possessed is anger and contention. Mm-hmm. That is a guaranteed way. It's almost like a one-way ticket. Everybody gets anger, but if you give in to that anger, if you become contentious and argumentative, you start fighting with people, that is a guarantee. That's we're going to get into signs in the next podcast of well, no, we're not. We're going to actually get into physical weakness, but after that, we're going to get into the signs. But anger and contention, boy, people who just get angry for no reason, they get angry at the drop of a hat and they drop the hat themselves. Mm-hmm. Your road rage incidents. You've got, there's so many.
I remember we read an article on a bishop that came home and he could feel it in his home. He could feel this contentious spirit, and he saw that the kids were fighting and everyone was really upset and no one was happy, and he could feel it. And so he went upstairs and he got on his knees and he prayed, and then he cast out, and then he said it was just like a miracle that the contentious spirits had gone. But it's so easy to invite them because your frustration, life is frustrating, and if you don't get a hold on your frustration, you can actually, that'll turn into anger.
Yes, so
and
you got to be
fighting.
careful. The last part we're going to cover on this is unrighteous dominion, and unrighteous dominion takes on so many different forms. Mm-hmm. We have people who are control freaks.
There is passive aggressive as well. So people withdraw, and they think, well, I've taken the higher road, but actually withdrawing, if it makes the other person upset, it's a form of control. That's why I suppose that the gospel talks about communicating and counselling with each other and trying to get along and resolution and solutions and stuff like that.
And then, a person that's an authoritarian, I know one person who's very authoritarian, keeps his kids in timeout for hours on end.
Too harsh.
Just very harsh. We haven't covered everything. There's so many different things that will cause possession. And this is just, all we've covered today is the sin side. We haven't even begun to cover the physical weakness side, which will be our next one. And so that's going to be it for this podcast. We hope we're being able to show you guys things that might help you. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.